Hey, welcome back. My name's Chad Kennedy, and I have been building a Ngombe Ngulu to the point now where it is time to etch the Damascus. And the first thing that I'm going to do is do all my hand sanding so that the steel is ready to be etched. What you want to make sure and do is get all the deep scratches out, because when you stick it in acid, if you have any scratches that are kind of deep, then the acid will just make that worse. So when I finish grinding, I usually finish grinding at about a 400 grit. And then when I go to my hand sanding, I'll step back down to like a 220 and start there. If I see any scratches left that aren't from hand sanding, whenever I get done with my 220, I will go back over those areas with like a 120. And then work my way up. And I'll usually go to 400 or 600 before I put the blade in the acid. Like everything with this sword, it's not going to fit in the same acid vat that I use for other knives and swords. So I've got to come up with something else. This is my kid's Lego bin, and I just lay the sword down in it and fill it up with acid. Another thing is I don't quite have enough acid, so I've got to add a little bit of acid and move this blade around so that it's completely covered. Now when I'm etching Damascus, I always like to set a timer to make sure that I don't leave the blade in there too long, because that's bad news. So for every 30 minutes, I will take this blade out over to the sink, clean it up with steel wool, 4/0 steel wool, soapy water, and get all the residue off of it, and then stick it back into acid. And usually 4, maybe 5 cycles will do it for me. The next process that I do is something that I've only been doing for about a year, and that's to soak the blade in instant coffee. So I've got boiling water here, and I'm gonna mix in this instant coffee pretty rich, and then I'm gonna soak the blade in that. The coffee is acidic, but if you leave it in there for a long time, it's really not going to change a whole lot as far as the depth of the etch goes. More than anything, it's leaving that coffee stain on the blade. Now, I'm going to let this blade soak for a couple of hours in here. I know some guys will do an only coffee etch and leave it in there for like a day. But it seems like a couple hours works for me, and really gives me a more durable finish almost than even like a gun blue. After that, we'll do the final process of finishing up the Damascus. I'm going to wet the whole blade down here with either WD-40, PB Blaster, or I've started using Birchwood Casey Barricade. And I'm going to hit the high spots with like a 2000 grit sandpaper. I'm going to keep working this until I've gone over the whole blade and the finish looks even all over the blade. You don't want to have any spots where you can tell where you've sanded, so everything needs to be blended in really well. You'll go through a little bit of paper on this because 2000 grit doesn't last very long. When I think it all looks good, I'm just going to soak it down with that Birchwood Casey Barricade and let it hang. I really like the way this one turned out. You know, all the time that I spent forging all this, if you didn't watch the first or second video, it was all worth it. You can see each one of those bars throughout the entire blade, which is really important. You know, it's not like you can get this thing from a store or anything like this. You really know it's handmade when you see it. Right now I'm working on getting my fit up just right. See here, I've probably see it better if I turn it like this. But I've got my handle fitted up to my guard with that museum fit. The handle is quite a bit bigger than the guard, and then you bevel the edges there to make them. This thing's hard to turn to get y'all to see right. But now I'm going to do the same thing down on this end. Right now I've just got the end more or less squared off. So I'm going to bevel that other end. That way the fit up in between these globes and the end of the handle is going to be just right. So I'm just going to take it over on my slack platen with a 400 grit, run it real slow and get it started, and then I'll hand sand the rest of it. But you got to be careful to not get crazy with a belt grinder. And so that, see there, it's a lot better having that kind of beveled edge as it goes into it right there. Now that I'm done with the construction of the blade, everything's finished except for the handle. In the next video, I'm going to show you how I do my silver wire inlay. Thanks for watching this. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and check out the other videos in this series. Also, if you give me any other feedback in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.